You know, you look through the crowds and rallies seeking justice for George Floyd, and there are protesters of different races, ethnicities, even religions, all taking a stand together. And although protesting goes a long way as a show of solidarity, many folks are wondering how they can continue to support their black friends, neighbors, and coworkers. And here with some recommendations on how to be an ally to the black community is Nii Addy. He's the head of marketing at Philo TV, the streaming service. Nii, thanks for being with us this morning. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
All right, and let's get to your first recommendation, contributing monetarily. Now, first of all, how does this help? And the more tricky question is, where should folks contribute?
Sure. And when I say contribute monetary, I'm also including contributing core competencies, which can be service donating. So the most direct way is to work with organizations that are fighting for social justice or equity. And there are many of them. It's a quick Google search away to find things like the Equal Justice Initiative, et cetera. And it depends where your sort of passions are aligned in terms of the ways you want to make a difference. There's a lot of different ways you can impact the black plight in America and fight anti-racism for that perspective. But that's one way to impact communities at abroad for people who are already fighting very hard on behalf of anti-racist agendas to make an impact beyond, whatever you personally are able to do.
All right, the other question is, how can companies step up? I know you've been talking a lot recently about privilege, access, and reach. What are we talking about here?
So if you think about how much time we spend either working at companies or interacting with the products and services of other companies, it's a large portion of our waking hours. So companies have a huge role in changing the reality of how we deal with race in America and how people's lives go from day to day. From a internal company perspective, changing the way that people interact with each other, creating space, fighting racism, things like bias training, making transformative commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion, all of those sorts of things, having empathy for your coworkers, understanding that this is personal to them, this is not something that's just happening on TV, go a long way. Now, all of those sorts of things need buy-in at the highest levels of the company, regardless of the background of the CEO or whomever is leading and making decisions of the company, and making sure that there is time and resource investment in order to make sure these things are long-standing initiatives and not a flare in the pan for the moment that's happening right now. The other side of what I think is very important for companies to consider are their customers.
All right. And lastly, you talk about minimizing the space where racist behavior is tolerated. I mean, what are the ways of doing that? How can companies do that?
Sure. Now, this is where I think a lot of the bias training and things of that nature come into play, and understanding how you're impacting your customers, what kind of narratives that you are pushing is important. Minimizing space is about really reducing areas where racism and racist behavior is tolerated, such that it isn't taking away or impacting the groups who have been oppressed by it. And this is something that anyone can do, not just companies, but really instituting and dedicating your efforts to allowing that to happen, so that, while there's free speech, you can be racist in your little pocket, but globally in companies which are largely private or publicly owned organizations, that those things aren't welcome, so that they do not impact the people who work there.
All right, Nii, we thank you for being with us. Nii Addy from Philo TV, great streaming service there. We appreciate you being with us this morning. Thank you, sir.